Okay. Now we are live, we can start.
Okay, perfect. Would you like to start, Mohamed, and like we discussed?
Okay. Good evening to those of you who are joining us from East Africa, Middle East, and Europe, and good afternoon to those of you who are joining us from the United States and Canada. My name is Mohamed Sheikh. I am the General Secretary of the Horn of Africa Policy Center. We are honored today to be hosting this timely and important conversation about crisis in Ethiopia. For those who don't know, the Horn of Africa Policy Center is an independent, non-profit, non-partisan organization for scholarship regarding the Horn of Africa, with a focus on the Somali people. It has a temporary headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota, and has agents in Jijiga of Somali region, Mogadishu, Hargeisa, Kismayo, and Nairobi as well. The Horn of Africa Policy Center aim is to inform and influence public policy through field-based research, informal analysis, and innovative solutions in the form of reports, policy previews, and public debates. Our topic today is Ethiopia in crisis, imagining the path forward. We will be taking questions from the audiences throughout the event. They will be intuited in our conversation. I'm honored to turn over to Senior Fellow Dr. Ismail, who will be moderating our discussion today, and the organizer of the event, Ms. Hafsa Mohamed, humanitarian and development expert. Many thanks for joining us. And over to Dr. Ismail and Ms. Hafsa. Welcome.
Thank you, Mohamed. I think Hafsa will say some, words before she'll pass to me.
Definitely. What I can do is I can, maybe Dr. Ismail can introduce everyone, and then I can discuss the objectives of this discussion, or should I go ahead and mention the objectives in the program title first?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so this program, Ethiopian Crisis, Building Solidarity, Imagining Paths Forward, hopefully will be, the discussion objectives are to display solidarity toward each other, the suffering communities throughout Ethiopia, particularly in Oromia, Tigray, Somali, Amharic, Ment, Beshangulu, Afar, and rural areas throughout the country, to discuss humanitarian crisis faced by the vulnerable communities in the Horn of Africa, to send messages to communities in Ethiopia and in the diaspora, to bridge gap between communities in Somali region or from the Somali region, Tigray and Oromia, by addressing past issues, supporting reconciliation and repatriation efforts, and sending messages to the respective communities, victims of state-imposed violence and marginalization, to debunk or challenge the criminalization or demonization of EPRDF, or regardless of the known fact that the economy and democratization of Ethiopia started with EPRDF, to attract international attention, to shadow, debunk efforts by Addis Ababa that gaslight the experiences of victims or exclude opposition members and parties, to provide preview on possible predictions regarding upcoming events in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa, and especially to create space for the many discussions and efforts to come to reach our collective goal of either establishing a multinational federalism system or divesting from Ethiopia and becoming independent nations and countries in the Horn of Africa. So yes, those are the objectives of today's discussion. Thank you. And
yeah, thank you very much, Hafsa. As Hafsa put it, the theme of the topic today is Ethiopian crisis, building solidarity and imagining path forward. And we have, prominent panelists, but we have a little bit of a technical problem to reach Getachew Reda, but we will try our best, to connect them while we are in the middle of, the panel. The discussion, we will try to, to talk to him if we can. Anyway, the panelists are today, Professor Hassan Keynan, former senior UN specialist, professor and the Horn of Africa political analyst. He's a well-known also in the poem. He has been one of the forefront, activists to put in the Somali cause on the map. The second one, a person we have is Jal Oda Tarbi, one of young, flamboyant he is international spokesperson of Oromo Liberation Army. And also the third person, as I said earlier, we might reach him. Getachew Reda is a senior spokesman of the Tigray People Liberation Front. As my sister Hafsa alluded and put it, as you know, in his inaugural speech on April 2nd, 2018, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed promised the Ethiopians that he would lead them to democracy. He underscored that there would not be a single gunshot and pledged that Ethiopians would enjoy peace and prosperity. With his charisma and rhetoric, he won the hearts of millions. Unfortunately, that euphoria was short-lived and dashed. Free and fair election failed as Abiy government cracked down on the opposition. This caused major political parties in Oromia, such as Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Federalist Congress, Ogaden National Liberation Front, and others to boycott elections that were eventually held in June 2021. With the war in Tigray, which led to election not being held in that region, it was clear that there was no strong opposition that could stand in the way of Abiy Prosperity Party. In addition, indeed, what could have been described as a solo-run Prosperity Party won more than 90% of seats in the federal parliament and regional councils. Far from achieving the long-sought consensus in Ethiopian politics, the election itself became another source of discontent. In Tigray, the civil war that erupted in November 2020 brought the country to the gates of hell. In what was unimaginable in modern Ethiopian history, the federal government invited another country's military, Eritrea, to invade one of the regions. Unspeakable atrocity at the hand of Ethiopians, Eritreans, and the Amara force were hallmarks of the war. Ethiopia pride itself on thousands of years of unbroken statehood. But that is, of course, today a myth. What we are experiencing today is the burning of human being alive by the Ethiopian security. As these days, there was a word that is coined, and it's saying that Ethiopia Prosperity Party was an attempt, to restore Ethiopian empire. However, they have lost the state that they inherited in the last 27 years. First, I will welcome Professor Keynan to ask him a few questions. Mr. Keynan, as you have written many articles, and as I say, you put the Somali cause on the map. Can you please shed light on the formation of the state building of Ethiopian empire?
Well, thank you, Dr. Ismail. I thank the Horn Public Policy Center team. First, I would like to add a little bit regarding myself. As mentioned, I'm an independent Somali who is interested in what's going on in Ethiopia and in the broader region. Having said that, I think you mentioned in introduction a very important concept about the state. I think before we try to solve Ethiopia's problems or build solidarity with other communities, it is very important that we understand the root causes of the problem. In my view, what we see today or last year or the year before is just the most pathological manifestation of a system that has started over a century ago. Really, what we are seeing is in Abyss, Ethiopia, is an attempt that we have seen before in Ethiopia for an Ethiopian leader jumping into the limelight and trying to finish the unfinished business of Menelik. If we really want to understand the problems that endlessly plague Ethiopia, we have to go back to the architecture of the Ethiopian state. I think the pathologies, the genocidal impulses, the dark impulses that have stalked Ethiopia for many decades have their roots in the hegemonic and to some extent criminal nature of the Ethiopian state. Where did the Ethiopian state come from? As you know, I'm not a specialist, but I have read enough about state systems. No state system is perfect, and none of them have started in the best way possible. Many of the state systems have a difficult times. But what is specific about Ethiopia is that once during the period of Menelik, Ethiopia was just an imagination. It had three elements. One was imagination. Why imagination? Because this Abyssinian king has imagined areas, territories, nations over which he has no control. That imagination included lands and peoples that go beyond today's borders of Ethiopia. Two, the other element was fraud. Why fraud? In cahoots with European colonial powers, Menelik has managed to fraudulently claim and legalize lands and borders that over which he had no control. And the third element was terror, which was what Menelik's armed men, also known in Amharic, I don't know, but I hear a lot, Menelik's armed men, Naftiya. These are the three elements, and all of them have their roots in Abyssinia. So in my view, at the core of the Ethiopian tragedy is something called Abyssinian power algorithm. If you know, algorithm is a self-sustaining system that is constructed by an engineers to develop its own operation independently. But the problem with Abyssinian power algorithm is that it was borrowed wholesale from Abyssinian state and is smuggled into what we know now as Ethiopia. And that a prominent feature of that state system is really institutional hostility towards other communities, other nations. And unless that system is really overhauled, Ethiopia will remain the abode of tyranny that it has always been. So to put it simply, the problems that we see today started 132 years ago. And they are deeply embedded in the architecture of the Ethiopian state, in the political culture of the Ethiopian political class. The Ethiopian political class have not managed to build a political framework that is inclusive enough, that is democratic enough, that makes everybody confident that they have a stake in this system. That is the root cause of the problem. And what we see in the history of Ethiopia, if we look at who ruled Ethiopia, the rulers of Ethiopia during the last let us say 100 years, they were very different in every respect. But what we see in all of them is these cyclical tragedies and terror schemes that they end up with. And that is really the roots of the Ethiopian problem. It is the state system, and that is the one that needs fixing. We are talking about droughts and famines these days, but Ethiopia suffers also from political famines and from political droughts. And that is the root cause of the problem. And it is a system that is inherently criminal. and inherently hegemonic. No one will be safe, including those who are trying today and telling that they own the system. Eventually, they will be victims. It is a system that is tailor-made for self-annihilation.
Mr. Keynan, let me follow up this question. As you know, even currently, when we put the Ethiopian reality, particularly what we consider as in your kind of people, intelligentsia, today they're still insisting, the curse of Ethiopian problem is ethnic politics. And as you know, Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic, multinational, multi-religious, from different aspects of social science, if we look at it. Why? Yes, Amano? Yes, Amano, yes.
Yusuf ጌታቸው ድምጽ በጣም ካንተ ጋር እየመጣ እየረበሸን ነው ሚውት አድርገው
ምንድን ነው ያልከው? እስቲ ደገመው ወንድሜ፣ አልሰማንም። ምንድን ነው ያልከው? አይሰማኝም ያልከው። እስቲ ድገመው ወንድሜ።
Is it what is going on?
Ismail, you can go ahead.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Keynan, what I'm trying to, what I'm alluding to it is the Ethiopian intellectuals, mostly people who come from the north, always they are blaming, they are saying the curse of Ethiopia is ethnic politics. And as you know, Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic, from all aspects of life. How on earth, these two different schools of thought will reconcile? On one side, that what we're seeing today, the reflection of the PP, prosperity, that are articulating, the concept of unitary states, and the majority of Ethiopia, more than 80%, that want a federal system. How we can reconcile the two concepts?
I think, as I said before, when we say Ethiopian intellectuals, whether it's from the north or those even not from the north, they have accepted a system that I said is self-destructive, inherently self-destructive. In the history of states, there are almost every state is multicultural in nature. There are very few nations, very few nation states in the world that are completely hegemonic. So what they're trying to do, in my view, is actually a centralized and brutal homogenization of diversity. This is a formula for disaster. In the history of statecraft, people who say that ethnicity is the problem, and they have been in power for over a century, and they have not solved their problem. It appears to me that they do not understand what ethnicity is, and they do not really, in my view, understand what the state system is. In my view, they are trying to transform other identities into one overarching ethnic identity. That is what they are trying to do. If the bottom line is a system that serves everybody, there is no need to demonize other nations and the ethnicity itself. That is who we are. That is the reality on the ground. If you want to change the realities on the ground, it has to be done in a way that is inclusive for everybody. But for one group, whether it's intellectual group or political class, to seize power and then organize, establish its own party, whether it's Prosperity Party or a different name, then decide for everybody else, that is a recipe for disaster. That is what we are seeing, what we are observing in Tigray now. A system that cannot differentiate between descent and the entire nations is a system that suffers from a pathological disorder. The Ethiopian political class, if they encounter any form of dissent, their default option is to destroy the entire nation. This political culture is really a self-annihilating political culture. So ethnicity is not the problem. The problem is the demons of human homogenization, who is trying to tell other ethnic groups that it is you who are the problem. Where are they from? Do they not belong to certain history, certain nationality, certain ethnicity? Where have they come from? So in my view, it has no empirical evidence. These ideas have no basis in history or in statecraft. It is really a political ploy to dominate other nations, as we have seen. And at its core, it is really the Abyssinian Pearl algorithm. It is a system. But the problem with those who have led Ethiopia to this Abyssinization campaign have forgotten even the key to that algorithm. What they are trying to maintain is a medieval system. Medieval system, they want to impose a medieval system on nations and peoples who are living on 22nd century. That is unworkable. It is not in the interest of anybody to take that approach to statecraft. And the latest, today I heard on BBC Somali service, a gentleman that I once met, who has been elected as the vice president of the Prosperity Party. It was really sad what he was saying. If anybody with a modicum of human decency who sees how that party was structured, the speed with which it was structured, the fact that it was one man, one delusion-prone man who has presided over everything, the manner and organizational structure that we have seen. It is really a recipe for disaster. In my view, what we have seen the last few days is not much different from what we have seen 132 years ago. What is the difference is a matter of scale and a matter of time. But at the core, it is internally, it is a hegemonic system and an inherently a criminal state that will destroy everything, in my personal view.
Mr. in Keynan, you know, one of the, best scholar who has written many books on Horn of Africa in general. You know his name is John Markakis. John Markakis wrote, his last book, the Ethiopia, the Last Two Frontier. And in that, there is one premise, which is, how steady, when he did a study on the nation, building, there is a premise that he's arguing. Markakis' main argument is that despite, revolutionary upheavals, the unequal relationship between center and periphery in Ethiopia remain essentially unchanged. That is core argument. Can you put, that premise in the context of Somali region?
I have enormous respect for Markakis. He is very insightful and very enlightened individual. I do not suggest that we got stuck in some frameworks. The idea of the periphery and center is in my view, this is my personal view, is really meaningless. Because what matters is the system, the architecture of the system that is at the center. That system is inherently self-destructive system. And if we look the other way, for example, when we say the Somali at the periphery, who is the Somali? What we mean by Somali? Somali is a nation, is a national identity that preceded, in my view, for sure, Ethiopia itself, and may have preceded even Abyssinia itself. This is an identity, a national identity that encompasses some over 30 million people in the Horn of Africa. They inhabit the most strategic and real estate in the Horn of Africa, from the Red Sea to inside Kenya. So when one formulates the idea of the center, I can put forth the argument that actually geopolitically, the geopolitical landscape, if we look, if we put on the right glasses and see the real geopolitical landscape on the Horn of Africa, the Somalis should be at the center, not at the periphery. But some structures for historical reasons that started in the early 20th century, the legalization, fraudulent legalization of the disastrous political construct that Menelik has imagined is really what we have inherited, the center and the periphery. But what my argument is that the center itself does not hold. It does not exist anymore. And from the beginning, it was itself based on the three elements that I have described. So I think we are past the idea of periphery and center. The center is no longer. And when it existed because of three diabolical elements that cannot sustain life. It was a system that was incompatible with the preservation of human life. Not only Somalis, Oromos, today, for example, although the most genocidal intervention has happened in Tigray, I know there is what I personally describe as crimson, as rose terror in Oromia. There is not only ethnic genocide, but a cultural genocide going on in Oromia. In the dark, the world does not see it. We are preoccupied with other places, but I have worked in that country for some time, and I worked with the universities there. And some of the students in those universities call me sometimes and telling me the terror that the people in Oromia live. So where are the Oromos? The Oromos are the center. So I think although it has some meaning before, at this stage, I don't believe it makes any sense to talk about the center and the periphery. The center was based on fraudulent construct, and now it has collapsed. There is no center that can save Ethiopia anymore. I'm sorry, but that is how I see it.
Okay, what is the fundamental Somali question in Ethiopia currently?
That is a very good question. I think that there are two elements in the Somali question. One is the same with every other nationality that have been corralled into the abode of tyranny that was envisaged by Menelik. So in that respect, the Somalis are an entity whose land has been seized by force and basically colonized. But the Somali question has also a peculiar attribute of its own, which is the one I have described before. It has a sub-regional geopolitical component in it. And the Ethiopian political class have never understood the Somali question for what it is. And the institutional hostility that I have associated with the Abyssinian power algorithm, one of the main targets is really an institutionalized hostility towards the Somalis, anything Somali. And that has cost Ethiopia a lot. They have never, if we take borrow concept of business, for example, if you are the CEO of a business, and you have been in business for 130 years, and during a century and 3 decades, your business has not only lost and lost and lost, but has completely eroded any legitimacy, and it has become a criminal entity. Then how can you maintain that you want to continue with such business for another one? So to summarize, the Somali question in the Ethiopian equation has 2 elements. One is, in my view, is a colonial question, like many other nations in the south and the east that the Menelik's men have seized and fraudulently claimed and legalized. The other issue, the Somali question, has a broader sub-regional element in it. And the Ethiopian political class during the past 100 years and more, they have tried to not see that one. They have tried to make half of the Somali question invisible. And that is the strategic blunder that has really blighted Ethiopia for centuries, for over a century. So to make it short, it is really a colonial repression question, and also it's a question that is anchored in a broader sub-regional reality that the Ethiopian political class and the Ethiopian state does not want to realize and recognize.
Okay, I'll come back to you, and I would like to move on into Jaloda Tarbi. Jaloda Tarbi, first, welcome to our Somali forum here. And first, I would like to quote here a brief description of Oromo Nation by the renowned Professor Mohamed Hassan, who teaches in Atlanta, Georgia. He has written many books on Oromo, history. And here, what he say about Oromo Nation. Oromo has earned the leadership OLF has earned the leadership and trust of the Oromo Nation. For the Oromo, the OLF is much more than an organization. It's an idea that has captured the imagination, the heart, the soul, and the spirit of the Oromo. It is, tirelessly works for the self-determination of Oromoma. Let me ask you this. Can you please dig into Article 39? As you know, the Ethiopian constitution is one of the best, classic that the late Meles Zenawi used to say when they were writing in 1994. Even, comma እንኳን ከውጭ ነው ያመጣነው. Even the comma and the period, we get it from the United Nations, from different, perspective of, legal, things. So my question to you is, today, an Oromo, leader called Abiy, he is trying to dismantle Article 39. And please, first, before we go to what we have with him, can you talk about and shed light on the concept of self-determination within the perspective, and can you ground it within the Oromoma?
Sure. I hope everybody can hear me. So when it comes to Article 39 and self-determination, that has the addition of that article into the Constitution was considered one of the biggest victories for the Oromo struggle since it started in the 1970s. Because in essence, when it boils down to it, our goal is self-determination, and what that means practically, meaning what we would expect to see before we can say we have finally achieved it would be the empowerment of the Oromo people on their land, to be able to choose what kind of political relationship they wish to have with their neighbors. From the OLA's view, we do not make specific, we do not advocate a specific position. So for a lot of times, when it comes to Oromos, there is the label of secessionist that is often put on us. For some people, that is negative. We do not necessarily believe so. However, we do not wish to actually make that choice for the people. So for us, we want to empower the people to be able to make that choice, and whatever choice they make is something that we are happy to accept. We believe the various subjugated peoples in Ethiopia as a whole that were forcefully annexed into the empire must be empowered to choose their futures, much like we wish the Oromos to do as well. They need to be able to choose their representation, and if that representation, that candidate runs on a ticket of secessionist and wins, then we go along with it. So when it comes down to it, it is political freedom under the current constitution, and that is what we're struggling for. When it comes to Oromuma means, the word itself means being Oromo, Oromo-ness, and part of that is our relationship to the land. So from the perspective of Oromuma, a lot of Oromos tie their identity very closely to the land. And when they're not able to exercise ownership over the land, exercise in the promotion of their culture in their own land, exercise in just participating in civic participation, political participation, that is what we're trying to put an end to.
Okay, can you also please, you already started, would you briefly summarize, the Oromo history to our audience?
Sure. So, for written records.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak out, please, a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, for most, in general, written history, the Oromos come into the spotlight in the 1600s. However, up to the late 1890s, most of Oromos, even though they were not in one collective state, they were various independent states, republics, and monarchies. By the 1890s, the king of Showa, Menelik II, launched an invasion southwards, conquering central Oromia, western Oromia, and eastern Oromia, further south down to the Kenyan border. Since then, since a large part of the Ethiopian state had turned to become Oromo land, part of the existence of the Ethiopian state has been dependent on the subjugation of the Oromo people and the exploitation of their land and the marginalization of their identity. So throughout the 1900s, there were various, a little bit kind of scattered struggles to regain that independence. There was the Bale Peasant Revolt of the 1960s, but all of that kind of came together with the creation of the Majatu Ulama Association, which was in the late 1960s. The crackdown on that by the imperial regime of Haile Selassie the first resulted in it transforming into what we now know as the Oromo Liberation Front, with the specific goal of regaining that independence, regaining that autonomy for the Oromo people. And so since the 1970s, the OLF has been struggling on that front. During the Derg period, there was the same kind of erasure of Oromo identity, subjugation of Oromo people, targeted suppression of Oromo political expression. And that continued until 1991, where there was some opportunity, to bring Oromia on the map, establish a state government. However, things did not manifest in the ways the Oromo people aspired to. In 2014, there was an attempt by the central government to expand the land of the capital city over Oromo farmlands, which would have resulted in the eviction of 2 million Oromos. And that kind of reignited what was always lingering, that desire, that aspiration to regain ownership over their own land, ownership over their ancestral lands, be free to be Oromo, be free to practice Oromuma. And we know about the 4 years of protest that eventually resulted in some would call it a soft revolution. However, the person who came into power, he spoke the language of Oromuma. And by that, I don't mean Afan Oromo, but I mean, he spoke in a way that was very recognizable to a lot of Oromos when it came to our aspirations, because he had lived among us. He knew exactly the right things to say to the people. But very early on in his rule, we saw that the moment he had somehow consolidated his power, there was no real desire on his part. It became clear his desires did not match that of the majority of the Oromo people. And so the struggle has continued until this point, especially when it comes to recent threats to the multinational federal system, and also specifically on the territorial integrity of Oromia. This government, more than any government in recent memory, has worked very, very hard in trying to create rifts between Oromos, with the idea that if you can break down the Oromo people's desire for autonomy, then you can it becomes easier just getting rid of the multinational federal system as a whole. I'm sure everybody here knows the Oromo Liberation Army was fighting in 2018, has continued to fight until now, with the express goal of actually completing the mission. We feel we've come a long way, but there is still more when it comes to, there's still more that needs to be done when it comes to securing a region. I mean, talking about Ethiopia as a whole, in which people can engage in political expression. They can when it comes to their own land, can control their land, can administer it how they see fit, can promote their culture how they see fit, can promote their language. We are close, but we're not there yet. There's a lot to be optimistic for.
Yeah, if I continue with along the line of political philosophy, what you mentioned about Abiy. As you know, Abiy inspired the notion of populists with embedded of some kind of religion, as he mixed both of them, and he say he's a godsend who believe that he can, no matter how much suffering you goes, at the end of the day, under the tunnel you can see the light. That's his belief. But when we come to the Oromos, way of thinking, homegrown, traditional system, such as Gada system, that has been inherently, a democratic system, that people change the power through every 8 years, and these other nation state that come from the Western, that the Ethiopian empire inherits, don't you think these different philosophical and political, are conflicting today?
Well, of course, they're very contradictory, but the Abiy regime has been very clever in using the symbolic power of Gada, of our cultural democratic mechanisms, our cultural processes when it comes to dialogue, he uses those institutions in order to prolong his power, using the kind of endorsement of elders, these kind of cultural markers that have a lot of respect, that people in Oromia have a lot of respect for. So he's been very kind of skillful in co-opting that whole cultural aspect for his own means. But you are absolutely right. When it comes to genuine Oromo culture, our concept of what good governance is, or our concept of the people's role in governance and society, what Abiy is doing now, his centralization of power, his complete disregard for dialogue or for Even the council of his closest advisors is completely anti-Oromo, completely anti-Gada, and it's not something that we find is something that works with our culture whatsoever.
As you know, 2015, when everybody was saying that the Oromo youth, especially the Kero and Kera, went to the struggle and pay a huge price, especially some even were saying የኢትዮጵያ እስር ቤቶች እንደ ኦሮሞ ይሸታሉ. I mean, the Ethiopian prisons, they smell like Oromo at that time. And then after more than 40,000 at the time were in prison. But all that, they put, all their power at the shoulder of, Lamma, the team Lamma. What, the Oromo, especially the Oromo, different, political, although there is a ramification within the Oromos, we know that. I mean, Oromo is the largest, in terms of, resource, population, different region, Wallo, Shawa, RC, all that we know. What kind of lesson that you as Oromo drew from that mistake, that it will never happen again? Because all other, nationality, especially people like my brother in Keynan was elucidly, describing earlier, they are looking to Oromo as a vanguard at this historical juncture. So what is your perspective on that?
Well, it's a little bit difficult to articulate this because on one end, it was not everybody that really bought into the idea of Team Lamma and this reform. There was a lot of people who were cautiously watching. But even those who really celebrated that rise and kind of gave the regime a blind eye to a lot of things with the hope of things that things will get better. We have to remember it came out of 4 years of protests where a lot of people were killed. So for them, it was an opportunity and a lot of sacrifice was made for it. So therefore, they did not want to squander it. They believed this is the best way to go. However, it did not pan out right. Something we can definitely learn from that is populism always has this danger. And it is, if you give one person your unconditional support, Abi is what results out of it. They say absolute power corrupts absolutely. You always have to be careful in being very critical and being very watchful over your leaders. In a democratic system, that is one of the main checks and balances. And as an Oromo for the future, to learn from a lesson to learn from that specific event is you cannot put all your eggs in one basket. And when it comes to something as important as a transition, there has to be consensus between all stakeholders. You cannot just take the words of one populist or demagogue and just run along with it. You have to stick to your principles. You must not be willing to excuse certain things with the thinking that it will just get better, regardless of how many victims there are. So you always have to keep a critical eye on your leadership, regardless of who it is.
So my other question is, as you know, today the diaspora can play a major role to shape the political, landscape in Ethiopia. What's your plan that, the Oromo, the Somalis, the Afar, the Gambela, all different others can work together in order to have some kind of impact on the reality on the ground?
Well, so in this case, there's the one issue I've personally seen is there is very little interaction when it comes to people of Ethiopia's various nations and nationalities, even when they have similar outlooks. Out here in the diaspora, there's very little cooperation, very little coordinated effort. And so the first thing that really needs to be done when it comes to bringing people under in one place, getting them to work together is, just organizing events such as this, getting dialogue going, creating more forums, throughout the diaspora, so people can actually sit and discuss on topics, and a lot of times realize that they agree on more things than they don't. So that needs to change. And I think the reason that we have found ourselves to be so fragmented is throughout the last 20 years or so, it has been kind of an act of political expression, even out here in the diaspora, to remove yourself from the fold of being organized under anything Ethiopia, especially for Oromos. So there's a kind of separation when it comes to Oromo community and other communities from the various nations and nationalities of Oromia. But that has, it has been a very big disadvantage in many areas, especially when it comes to advocacy, global outreach, contacting media, getting the story out, and humanitarian efforts as well. So it's just initiatives such as this and initiatives such as this for the general public as well, holding more of those in towns and cities throughout the diaspora where we have a large population.
Okay, before I will pass to to Keynan and ask both of you guys the last question, how do you, in the end, we'd like to hear your timely message for the Oromo and for others also, what's your last message?
So there's a lot of reasons to right now look at the situation in the country and be somewhat disheartened. But from my view, at least, I have a rather positive outlook when it comes to the future of Ethiopia and the future of the Horn as a whole. I do not think we're going to see the same rise of dictatorship, specifically in Ethiopia, as we have seen in previous times. I believe the mechanisms and processes that allowed Abiy to rise into power are, at this current point, barely functioning. I don't think we're going to see a repeat of something similar. And moreover, the people throughout the country and the Horn as well are more politically active, more politically conscious than ever before. All this, it might lead to some political agitation from the part of the public against whatever tyrannical forces governing their state. But I think in the long term, we will see the dawn of the opening of political space throughout the Horn of Africa. When it comes to Ethiopia specifically, it's very clear to see that the central government's hold on the various federal states has weakened greatly. I do not expect to see Abiy in power for much longer. And it is up to us to really ponder, how do we carry on afterwards? What kind of transition do we want to go through? And what claims, what do we have to reach consensus on? Because obviously there's disagreements, but we have to be ready to compromise where necessary. And generally, I would just say, however dark it looks right now, there's a lot of things to be optimistic for. Generally, things are going in the right direction, however bad it looks.
Okay, Galatoma, my brother, we will ask you some question from the audience. Mr. Keynan, let me come back. Let me ask you a few questions before I move on to the Q&A. So my first question to you is, when it comes to the in our region right now, there is a drought, the worst drought that we have seen in century. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Before I go to that, it's very important. I want to go back and underline one important point.
Go ahead.
In politics, the individuals and even an entire political class, to focus on them really is a very risky strategy, because the individual is always either comes from or is fit into a system. It is the frameworks that really change either positive outcomes or catastrophic outcomes. Abiy has clearly chosen the frameworks that he wants to use. The framework, the model he wants to use is the model on which Ethiopia was constructed. And the allies he has chosen are the allies that have been the armored wing of the Abyssinization of Ethiopia. So I would just want to highlight this fact.
That's a good point.
Particularly ideological frameworks matter, and whoever changes, I don't worry much about Abiy right now, but whoever comes or replaces him, what will he do? What will he do, or what will she do? It is the system that we must keep our eyes on the ideological frameworks and put in alternative frameworks. Think about alternative framework. If there are no alternative frameworks, then whoever comes, if the situation turns a little bit ugly, he runs into the existing framework and tries to mobilize those who are for that system. Having said that, it is true, the drought is, for all intent and purposes, the biggest catastrophe that is happening right now in the Somali region. Although neither the federal government or the regional government have really done any credible empirical work to systematically study the impact. It is very clear from the local sources that this is not the cyclical once 10 years, once in every 10 years. It is much worse than that, deeper than that, and it is more catastrophic in terms of impact. So of course, it is not entirely man-made. It has some unfortunate coincidence. The time that it has come, it is the time where things were not in the right place. But the response that the regional government and the federal government has given is really, in my view, unfortunate, to put it mildly. Number one, there is clear evidence that the government tried to hide this, particularly the regional government, to make it simple. It is something that it can handle itself. Nobody has died for some time. And later on, we have seen other evidence come out because they have been obsessed with the campaign for elections that you mentioned earlier, that they have really completely forgotten the drought and its catastrophic impact on the people, and focus squarely on the politics of the election. And that was, and in a way that is not accidental, because this is not the first time that an Ethiopian government or a regional government have tried to hide disasters, whether it's floods or it is diseases or epidemics. This is the culture. When I'm talking about systems, it is the systems, it is this architecture that people go to and borrow symbols. Even the language that they use is very similar. It's standard hegemonic language that they use. And I will tell you even one story that really is heartbreaking. As you know, I have a background in the UN system. The UN system that exists in Ethiopia is the largest country team anywhere in Africa. This is for historical reasons, and also for the status of Ethiopia with the country that hosts the African Union. So the tragic thing that has happened is that once there is something like a calamity, a drought in a country, the UN country team is usually where developing countries rely to go there for a fact-finding mission and make an assessment and make a plan and devise a craft a big response, coordinated response to the drought. But the UN system has been really domesticated. In the international diplomatic language, it's called, they have gone native. The Ethiopian state has infiltrated the UN system. Number one, it has cleansed those UN institutions that had the biggest capability in the UN system to respond to such calamities like drought. So 5 of the UN senior UN agencies that were expelled months ago were from OCHA. What is OCHA? OCHA is the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. These were the people who were responsible. And a few weeks ago, I saw the UN sent WHO and the FAO, one headed by an official from Djibouti, the other headed by an official from Niger, to go to study the drought and the response to the drought. In my lifetime, over 30 years of the UN, I have never seen these 2 agencies being in the forefront of a serious drought anywhere in the world. This itself shows that even the UN international system has been really turned topsy-turvy. And not only that, the UN system has been used in a way that it has amplified the propaganda of the government. For example, when the Deputy Secretary General, Ms. Amina Mohamed, by the way, a person who I know and met when I was in Nigeria, and she was the head of the senior advisor to the president on Millennium Development Goals, a very bright individual who had broad mind, really. It was never clear why she went to the Somali region, because she went to Afar to where there were wars. The Somali region was the most stable and most peaceful area. But when she came and she went to a spot, really a stage set for propaganda, and she was zoomed in and zoomed out. There was a press conference where the Ethiopian president, who, by the way, also a person that I have worked with when she was the head of the United Office in Nairobi, and she said that nobody has died as a result of the drought. This was really, in my view, is extremely unfortunate. The whole of Ethiopia, in its history, it never had the capacity, the infrastructural capacity, the institutional capacity, the technical capacity to monitor who dies or who lives in even one suburb of Addis Ababa. For the president of Ethiopia, on this side, flanked by the Deputy Secretary of the UN, and on the other side, flanked by the president of the Somali region, to say that in public, nobody has died of drought, was really, really diabolical in my view, because the Somali region is the second largest region. Logistically, even it is impossible. And that the UN system that was actually has the biggest capacity to gather details were not there. So it has not only limited the capacity of the UN and the country to respond, it has actually been exploited for propaganda purposes. But having said that, I think now it is the responsibility of everyone, including the Somali regional state and the federal state, to go there and make sure that a coordinated, comprehensive coordinated response is given. It is too late. I understand why people are frustrated, because that is the nature of the regime, the nature of the organization, the nature of the state we are dealing with. We can't expect a monster to be kind. the Ethiopian state is really a state system in which nobody in the long term, no one will be safe, nowhere will be safe. I would like really to be optimistic, like my Oromo brother Oda, optimistic about the future of Ethiopia, but it is based on the evidence that we have, including the inaugural convention of the Prosperity Party. It is very difficult to see even a glimmer of light. Of course, in politics, everything is possible. You know, some miracles happen. After all, miracles do happen, but we do not see the outlines of something that is constructive for everybody. So no question that the drought has produced outcomes that are catastrophic for the Somali. And as you know, even the entire Ethiopian system was based on marginalizing the Somalis and other nations, but particularly Somalis, to the extent that numerically even they have manipulated the demographic data always. In the last 40 years, there were 2 times that census were conducted, and neither of them were really fully conducted. So what we have estimated population is not even clear. The latest that I have seen, which is based on the 2000 census, extrapolations of the 2007 system is about 6.3, but the people are more than that. So reaching even everywhere is logistically very difficult. So it is much more complex than even ordinary droughts because of the expanse of the territory of the Somali region. Of course, individually, the communities receive calls from very far remote areas. And I would like also to appeal to, it's not only Mustafa and Abi. There are people in Jigjiga who tell us that they represent specific communities. But those communities, we never see those representatives that represent districts and sub-districts in the Somali regional state, that we never see them coming out and saying that there is a drought in the constituent, ravaging in the constituent, my constituent. These people must come out and clearly say, give the message, because they are the ones who have direct connection with their constituents. So these representatives in the regional parliament, they must come out and summon some courage and a modicum of human decency and talk about the fate of their people. Also, the traditional elders and the rest of the political class, they must form a united front to, and also the political organizations, I must say, in the Somali region, to really do everything imaginable and possible in their power to address every effort towards mitigating the tragedy of the drought.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keynan. You cover what was the main point. Because of timing, the time here, I will ask you my last question, and then we go to the question and answer. My last question to you is: there is this mindset in the north that the Somalis are entertaining or articulating the notion of clan ideology. Even when they talk about the 360, the Assads, and all these, Amharic, media, they are always thinking that Somali are Gosa in their mindset, which is opaque, and myopic in my perspective. How do you reconcile, the central that even the last, 27 years, more than 10 Somali leaders have been changed? Is the problem from ourselves that, as you say from the beginning here, that we are lacking some kind of framework and institution? Or is it the problem that we are not independent and to make the final decision to ourselves? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very important question, Dr. Ismail. When I was trying to explain the Abyssinian notion of the state system, it's not only the architecture and institutions of the state. It is the entire apparatus of the state. It is the diplomatic, it is the security, it is the defense, it is the cultural industry, it is the educational system, it is the theater, it is the literature. The entire system is based on demonization and institutional hostility toward certain nations, particularly the Somalis. So this really is no surprise to me. But I must admit that there are also reasons for this. In the strategic calculus of the Ethiopian leaders and the political culture of the Ethiopian elite, the Somalis constitute an existential threat to the Ethiopian state. That medieval mindset, that paranoid mindset is really the core problem that really blighted Ethiopia for such a long time. So much time and energy and resources have been wasted on fighting, demonizing, and marginalizing any notion of Somali. And it's that approach to Somalis have not only disadvantaged the entire state and the entire population of Ethiopia, it has bankrupted the country. If we go back to the many wars that they have fought to just contain the Somali question, because they have this paranoid, really deeply paranoid and corrosive fear of the Somalis. As long as that demon exists within the expanse, the hegemonic bosom of the Ethiopian political class, it disadvantages both. It is what the Americans now call the cancel culture. You can't, it is impossible to cancel the Somali identity and heritage in the Horn of Africa. The geopolitical structure, the historical realities do not allow this. And on the other side, having said that, there have been weaknesses and constraints on the leaders on the part of the Somalis, those who are in now and those who have been before. And the political class of the Somalis also need to craft an approach, not only to be always either a periphery or to be told what to do, but to infiltrate the hegemonic narrative that is embedded in the architecture of the Ethiopian state and try to deconstruct that narrative and inform the Ethiopian political class that it is destructive, it is self-destructive to waste so much time and so much energy and so much resources on demonizing the Somalis. It is impossible to destroy every Somali, to cancel them. And by nature, the Somalis are democratic, and they do not want to dominate anybody else unless they come to a state where everybody has a stake. The Somalis will be in the forefront of any democratic system. What is happening right now is, one example, the last example I give you. For historical reasons, the Somali struggle, which has two elements that have preceded both Ethiopia and Abyssinia, are the Somali identity as a national identity. It's not a state, a nation state, as a national identity that is a collective identity of all Somalis, and the Islamic faith. These are the two elements that are basic. That struggle has been, the ONLF has been in the forefront of that struggle for the last nearly 40 years. And what has happened in 2018, for the first time in the history, that organization have decided to lay arms and try to seek to settle the Somali question through peaceful means. And we have seen the last 3 years and 8 months, the Somali region has been the most peaceful region for nearly over 60 years because of that strategic decision by ONLF. And what has been the response? There will be a response, but particularly the regional state response, and also coming from Addis Ababa, was to undermine, not only to undermine that peace agreement, but also to provocate the leadership of ONLF and to incite them to go to the bush again. But they have shown a great deal of patience, and that is why the Somali region has enjoyed really this extended and long period of peace and stability. My last point is that the Ethiopian system, as conceived and constituted today, is not only a threat to Ethiopia, it is a threat to the entire region, and I will even extend that to Africa. Because as you know, the role of the African Union has been completely subdued under the Ethiopian state. And now they have gone even further. They want to even infiltrate the UN system so that the Ethiopian hegemonic narrative suppresses the independence of the UN also. This is very dangerous, not only for the region, but for the future of Africa. I have seen so many Africans that are rising up, supporting the genocidal impulses that are working in Ethiopia to destroy entire nations. This is not the path towards peace in Ethiopia, particularly what most people say are the core of the political class, or the Northerners, and particularly the Amharas. I will tell them that you need to change this mindset. I will go even further, say that think your own strategic future. Look, this future, this system is a system that devours you, your children, and the next generations, and the coming generations. Remember the last words of Mengistu Haile Mariam 5 months before he left. He said, "My father has not seen peace. I have not seen peace, and my children will not see peace." This is the guy who tried to unify Ethiopia. And in the end, what he did, go into exile. This is the fate of every Ethiopian leader who accepts wholesale that hegemonic system and try to impose on the rest of Ethiopia. It may work for some time, but in the long run, these demons will destroy themselves. And I'm sorry, I've taken too long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keynan. That was wise and then prophetic, messages. This week, the United States Secretary, former Henry Kissinger, along your line, he say, we can begin things, anything, war, anything. But the biggest problem of human being, he say, is how to end. That is the problem that we're struggling right now in Horn of Africa. And in the long run, we will discuss more about the national, dialogue, how to create, management of conflict, and all these concepts, with respect of our time. And I will pass to Mohamed. Mohamed, we have to, right now, we will take a few people, like we already assigned some Mukhtar and others, and they can ask a few questions. And we are already, past time, but we will give, little, the space, the forum for the others audience. Take over, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. I think it is time to welcome some of our audiences. Okay, I think Dr. Gele is ready. Dr. Gele, welcome to if you have any comment or questions.
Yes, and can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. And actually, so many things has been said. I want to do quickly the part of the history, which states that there is no past, there is no present event without past. So actually, their history is our past agony. This is what I'm going to share with my friend Odi Therapy. And actually, we are sharing common history. And actually, one of the most important they look over is that what we are empire. And by classical definition, an empire is a collective of nations under one rule. That still applies to us. So actually, I don't like to hear the word ethnic because it has got different connotation across in the political arena. We are nations and nationalities, and this is what we are. So actually, the history of Ethiopia, actually there is a document called 20th Century Ethiopian Political Social Doctrine, in which that was written by Tedla Haile in 1920, and Haile Selassie implemented it. What was it? Actually, the dominant ethnic, the dominant nation, which was Amharic, as Bancroft has noted, actually I take with a lot of and mixed feelings about the history of Bancroft. He said this was assimilation policy in which the conquerors raised the conqueror to their own level, and the latter abandoned their customs and social organization. And this has resulted in which schools were taught in Amharic churches, even the Christian Orthodox Oromos, they cannot use Afan Oromo. Courts of law was conducted in Amharic. Even citizenship tests were done. So this political centralization, cultural assimilation, and economic exploitation was for Southern nationalities. This is our common history as Southern nationalities, Oromo and Somalis. And let me come to a question that you have asked Dr. Ismail, that the ethnic conflicts are the problem of Ethiopia. I want everybody to read David Burton in 15 years, about 15 years ago, he mentioned it. The problem in Ethiopia is not federalism, but less federalism, in which actually it was, and according to many scholars like Mahmoud Mamdani, he said what we have done in the under TPLF was institutional indirect rule. So actually what is written in the constitution has never been practiced. If it was practiced, things would have been different. Now coming to quickly, I don't want to take much time. The Ethiopian crisis. The Ethiopian crisis is reflected on two things. Number one, there's commitment problem. Actually, the commitment problem, whatever you agree with the empire, they deceive in the end of the day. And this has happened in 1991. One ONLF, they tabled the referendum, and Oromo Liberation Front, they bombarded in their encampments in 1991 and they were ousted. So ousting of authoritarian regime, holding fake elections, and ending up changing old master to a new master is the phenomenon. It happened in 1991, 2005, 2010, 2015, and it happened now in the last elections. So this does not work. So what do we want in there? Actually, we want actually the solution to be comprehensive. And there is the partial solution to the conflict does not work. And it happened many times. So actually, yeah, there is interruption.
You can go ahead, Dr. Gele.
Yeah, the key principle in democracy and political settlement is inclusion. We want an inclusive dialogue in which the nations and nationalities will do cost-benefit analysis for their future, whether to stay in this empire or to opt out. And this is the only way out. And I think the best way is all of us, we should have to work for inclusive transitional government. That inclusive transitional government should have to overcome. They should have to create policies to overcome commitment problems. And actually, we should have to use Article 39 as a source of conflict resolution. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gele. Next, I would like to welcome Mazagire and request if she can say something about the current situation in Tigray.
I think Miaza had another commitment and left the conversation, but we can continue with the question. Was Dr. Gele's question directed to Oda Tarbi?
No, he was a comment only.
Oh, it was a comment?
Just did a comment, yes.
It was a comment, but I have got one question for Oda Tarbi.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Actually, and long time I put DM in your Twitter, and I don't know whether you recognize it or not. And actually, I was mentioning that Somalis and Oromos are strategic allies. And the center always tries to create tension and conflict along the fault lines. What do I mean by fault lines? Where there is mixed intermarriage, cousins, nieces at the border between Oromo and Somalis. So we need not to allow the center to use these fault lines to create problems. So what's your intake on that? And do you agree with me that at the end of the day, we are a strategic alliance? Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I got the second part of your question, but could you just repeat the first part, please?
The first part is that, actually I put into your DM long time back.
Okay.
The center always tries to create tension and conflict along the fault lines. The fault lines, I mean, where the Oromos and Somalis are cousins and nieces, uncles, intermarriages. So actually, we need to promote to promote an awareness among our people, so they will not let the center to use these fault lines to create tension between two nations. And my second question is, what unites us is more what divides us. Do you agree that historically and now we are strategic allies?
I would go further and say we are definitely strategic allies, but when it comes to Oromos and Somalis, there are cultural ties that go back for hundreds of years. When you look at some aspects of Oromo culture and some aspects of Somali culture, you can see it's various shades of the same color. So that link exists, that cultural link exists. Of course, there's familial links on the borders. There are towns and cities in which the majority are Oromo and Somali, which are living together side by side. And when it comes to ensuring that the central government does not use certain land issues or the certain resource issues in order to spark some sort of clashes, which they attempted to do even pretty recently, trying to get Oromos and Somalis to fight, communities to fight over water resources around Guji. One way, when it comes specifically to Oromos and Somalis, to be an obstacle to these kind of divisive efforts by the Abiy regime, is to use the cultural mechanisms we have for peace and reconciliation. So discussion, dialogue. I've noticed that among the Cushitic language speaking groups, the idea of coming together, sitting down with elders, it is a large part of the culture. It is how conflict is resolved within and within the community, and also between communities. So we can use those mechanisms, more widespread use of those kind of mechanisms. But the kind of conflict that you mentioned, when it comes to the central government stoking clashes between various ethnic groups throughout the country, very intentionally, with two goals that I have in mind right now. One is they start the conflict and then they come in and extinguish the flames themselves, to present themselves as the peacemakers, the ones that are able to keep this country together. And the second reason the ruling regime is doing this is to vilify the multinational federal system and to blame it as a source of bloodshed, as a source of continued instability, when it itself is orchestrating these clashes. Its own actions that limit the constitution's decentralized structure are, in a lot of cases, the very source of instability, the very source of tension between various groups. In the long term, of course, I doubt the regime is going to seize these kind of activities by recognizing the long-term consequences of engaging in such activities. However, we must use grassroots efforts, using existing cultural mechanisms to engage all sides in dialogue, and be proactive about it as well. There are some issues that we know are just kind of linger over time when it comes to between various communities throughout the country. So being proactive in engaging with those potentially divisive issues that could be the source a source of instability now, finding consensus now, rather than waiting for some kind of clashes to be sparked. In the long term, however, there needs to, these kind of disagreements, the resolution needs to move away from the battlefield, and of course through some legal framework, such as through the courts or a legislative body. And right now that is more or less impossible, just because these institutions have about zero legitimacy in the eyes of the people, which is actually one of the reasons they prefer to take matters into their own hands, since the political space is completely closed. People do not have an avenue through which to air their grievances and to try and find a solution. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, can I say something there?
Yes,
go ahead.
Professor Keynan.
Yeah, I think the question raised by Dr. Gele is a good one. In my view, this thing should go beyond relying on cultural traditional mechanisms. And I have been involved in generating some ideas along those lines. And I think some kind of political reconciliation mechanism must be set up so that can be activated once things are within the Ethiopian system. Even the cultural and the traditional systems are being eroded. And recently, what has happened in part of Oromia, an entire group of elders have been really murdered in the most heinous way imaginable. So everything has to be this issue of common interest has to take the shape of more than just relying on traditional, because that, although in itself it's good, the odds against it within the borders of Ethiopia is very huge. My other point is that please always focus on the system. There are the idea of Abiy being an Oromo or something else, in my view, is we have to go beyond that, because it eventually what has been mentioned before, the way the state system has been structured is that those who are coming into the system, if they belong to other nations, must change the identities, must change the religion, must change the other values, so that they can be fit into the system. So the problem right now we're having in Ethiopia is really along the architecture of the state, and that we need to focus always. And convince other groups and communities and nations that we have to avoid a system that is categorizes otherizes other nations as enemies. This is the biggest problem that we face in Ethiopia. Here, I would like to stop, and also I would like to leave, because it's past close to midnight in our time in East Africa. So I would like to sleep. I usually sleep early. I would like to thank all of you for the opportunity to discuss this, and enjoy it and learn a great deal about this. And thanks to Horn of Africa Center. This is my first encounter with them. I had some doubts before, but now I am a little bit more comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keynan. And we are hoping to see you more. You know, you can see, at least we can do something. And thanks a lot again.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Keynan. On behalf of Horn of Africa Police Center, we would like to apologize for the inconvenience. We used more time than we have planned, and also the technical error from Tigray, from Mekelle, because of the situation in Tigray. And okay, we will have, we'll look forward to host more events like this, and I can understand how this is important for the people, for the Somali people and the other people and nations in Ethiopia, and also Horn of Africa. And that I would like to say that concludes our event for today. And thank you for everyone. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, just wanted to conclude. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We'll definitely reschedule and hopefully have a part 2 of this due to the technical difficulties we had in Tigray. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.